This video is part of the review section of part 1 of a course called JavaScript for Visual Learners, a few sections of which were already added to this channel as videos. This video will review the main types of primitive values in JavaScript and then will review custom objects. It will then finish off by discussing a few things which have not yet been mentioned when discussing objects in the course. If you would like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to our channel. We have spent a fair bit of time discussing value types in JavaScript, and this was in fact the main topic which we covered in the first part of the course. We talked about the primitive value types, things such as number and their subcategories, strings, booleans, the two empty types, null and undefined, the two specialized types, symbol and begin. We talked about the fact that primitives are copied by value. There is also the object type, which we discussed, and more specifically how we form custom objects using object literals. This is an example of one. In this case, we are defining an object with 5 different properties, which include numbers, strings, an object, and even a function. We talked about how we can visualize an object as a type of a bookshelf where the individual shelves represent key value pairs. And the fact that we can, for example, call a function on the object itself as a method, which can then access some of the properties inside of the object. This is what makes objects very valuable. They are allowing us to lump like things together and then have methods which can operate on these same features. We should be aware that there is a few aspects of objects which would be discussed in the other parts of the course. For example, there is more than one way in which we can define an object. We can use the object constructor run as a function. We can use things called factory functions. We can use the new word with a constructor function or a class. We have not talked about prototypal inheritance. This is what allows us to link objects to one another so that we can use the methods defined in parent objects in child objects. In fact, the very bottom property in the object on the left, the proto property, does have everything to do with prototypal inheritance. And this is again something which we will discuss later on in the course. We should also know that there is a bit more to the values inside of a key value pair. And in fact, if we look at a value, and if we look at the ECMAScript specification, it turns out that the value itself is something like an object, where apart from the value property, where the actual value would go, there are things called writable, enumerable, configurable. Writable, for example, determines whether we can change a value once we have defined it. Enumerable would determine whether the value would be visible in a for in loop. And configurable would determine things such as, are we allowed to delete the value? So notice that there is additional layers which we have not discussed. These are advanced topics, but again, let us make sure that we are aware that they at least exist. Something else which we have not discussed are the fact that there are many types of built-in objects. The function object, for example, is one of these. Every time we declare a function in JavaScript, regardless whether it's a standalone function or part of an object as a method, the function itself would be an object. And each of these built-in objects are in fact regular objects, very much regular objects with a few tweaks on them, with some special properties and methods that make them behave the way they do. And there are many types of these. We have the function object, the array object, these wrapper objects around primitive values, number, string, boolean. We have things such as set and map, date, math, and many others. And again, a key thing that we have to remember about objects is that objects are copied by reference. And in fact, almost everything in JavaScript is an object.